In today's video, I want to try to answer a question that I have been getting quite a lot in recent times. The question is whether or not I recommend using the ProRes recording function on the newer iPhone models for capturing your underwater adventures. Well, let's have a look at that. Hi and welcome back to the Underwater Filmmaking School. It's great to have you back here on the channel with me today. Now let's address the question that I have been getting quite a lot lately, whether or not it is desirable to use ProRes recording on your iPhone 13 Pro or the just newly released iPhone 14 Pro when filming your underwater adventures. And you can look at this in different ways. I just wanted to make it very practical here today, and so I decided to take my iPhone 13 Pro because I'm still waiting on my 14 Pro. I've decided to take that for a dive yesterday here in the Lake of Zurich and just record the same scene in all the different options available on the iPhone 13 Pro. Bring it then into Final Cut and color correct and grade the footage and see whether or not I can actually find a difference in how the footage behaves and how easy it is to work with and grade in post-production. So when we first talk about the codecs, what is a codec? Well, a codec is nothing else than a container that holds your footage inside of it, and it determines how much your footage gets compressed, so how big the file size is gonna be, and it also determines how this compression is achieved. On the iPhone 13 Pro and also on the 14 Pro, we generally speaking have two different codecs that we can choose from. We have the ProRes 422 codec and we've got the HEVC codec, which is the high efficiency video codec. And the HEVC is a codec that compresses your footage quite a lot, resulting in very small file sizes, but being very hard on your computer because the codec compresses everything so much and the computer has to work a lot to decompress and decode your footage to be able to play it back in your editing software. And that's already one of the big advantages of the ProRes codec, because the ProRes codec is not compressing your footage as much, thus making it much easier on your computer and your editing software to play back your footage, even if you have effects and stuff already applied to your footage. So if you're working with all the computers, then a ProRes codec is most likely going to be easier for you to work with. Newer computers should not really have much of an issue with the HEVC codec either, but definitely if you're working with all the computers, the ProRes codec is going to be a little beneficial there for you. Now, file size. If we look at the different file sizes, looking at ProRes, and if you look at 1 minute recording at 4K in 30 frames per second, you're looking at around 6 GB of file size, which is quite a lot. The exact same settings, but then used with the HEVC codec or recorded with that codec, will result in a file size of about 200 megabyte. And that is a huge difference. So depending on how much storage space you have and how much storage space you want to use for a certain project, you might already be pushed into either one way or another when it comes to the decision whether you should be using the ProRes recording mode on your iPhones. So enough with all the technical stuff, let's get a little more practical here now, and I want to show you the footage that I've recorded yesterday. We're going to look through the footage first, and then I'm going to take it into Final Cut Pro, and I'll do a bit of a basic color correction and a little grade on the footage as well, so that we can see how the footage behaves, and whether or not we can find any distinct differences between the ProRes 422 footage and the HEVC footage. Now, one thing that I need to add here is that I've also found that you can activate the HDR, the high dynamic range recording inside your iPhone 13 Pro, and I would strongly recommend you do this because the standard setup of your iPhone 13 Pro or 14 Pro for that matter as well, I guess, is that the HDR mode is turned off. And having the HDR mode turned off, both those codecs will record in 8-bit color depth, which is just a standard, that's okay. But if you turn HDR on, it means that both of these codecs will then record in 10-bit. So you get 10-bit color depth, which means that you're just gonna be able to capture a lot more varieties of the different colors. You're just gonna get more colors to work with, and it should be actually much easier to do a color correction and a color grade using the HDR 10-bit recording options. The first set of images that you see here has been taken straight from the camera. Nothing has been done to that footage other than converting the HDR clips to SDR clips so that we can actually compare them with each other and everything is in an SDR timeline anyway. But other than that, nothing has been done to it, and you can see that right here you can't really tell any difference. The footage looks pretty much identical. The second set of footage that you see is the exact same one as we just saw, but this time I have applied a very mild color correction. I've just increased the saturation and the contrast a little bit, and even here you can't really see much of a difference. It pretty much looks the same on all of the clips. And lastly, I wanted to see how the footage would behave if I start pushing the colors a little bit, and I did something that I do quite regularly with the footage taken underwater. I try to adjust the background color of the water, and in this case I wanted to go from the greenish to a rather bluish color of the background. And to my surprise, I have to say that I can't really see much of a difference in between those four clips. And even when we talk about the ease of getting to that result, it was pretty much the same with all of these clips. None of them was particularly difficult and none of them was particularly easy to grade. It was pretty much all the same. Now, don't get me wrong, by no means I want to say that all these codecs are equal to each other, but for what I'm using the footage for and how I work with the footage, I can't really see much of a difference in between any of these codecs for my personal workflow. And I think for most of you out there, unless you're doing heavy color grading and color corrections, you won't really find a huge difference in using any of these codecs. So what's the conclusion then? Should you use ProRes 422? Should you not use it? Should you use HDR, the HDR function? Should you not use it? Well, it depends. Honestly, I think that having the HDR function activated and recording in HDR is probably a smart move because it gives you the 10-bit color depth and it will just give you a little more leeway correcting your footage. In the example that I showed you today, you couldn't really see it, but there will be instances where you will be just having a lot more colors in your image, and there it's probably going to be easier to work with a 10-bit file than an 8-bit file. In regards to using ProRes or not, I personally would say no. I don't really see much of a difference and much of a benefit in using the ProRes 422 codec compared to the HEVC, unless you have a really old computer and it's struggling with the HEVC codec, decoding that and replaying that on your computer. But if that's not the case and your computer can handle the HEVC compression, then just save yourself all that memory space, that storage space, and just go with the HEVC codec, but with the HDR function enabled on your phone. And there you go, that's my opinion and my recommendation to you when it comes to whether or not you should be using the ProRes 422 codec to film your underwater adventures in. Hopefully this video was useful to you and you got something out of it, maybe found it even a little entertaining. If that's the case, please do, as always, hit that like button. You know it means a lot to me, and also consider subscribing to the channel so you're not missing out on any future content that will be uploaded here. If you do have any questions regarding what we've discussed today, feel free to put them down in the comment section below, and I'll be more than happy to get back to you as quickly as I can. Thank you very much for your time and for watching, and don't forget to capture those amazing underwater adventures of yours, no matter what recording codec you choose for it. And I will see you in the next video.